It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Anyone can bake bread, but it takes something special to rock it. This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast. This episode is brought to you by Dave's Killer Bread, champions of killer taste, killer texture, along with killer nutrition. Dave's Killer Bread is the organic bread you can eat on its own if you want to. Add your favorite sandwich fixings, and you've got yourself an elevated eating experience that you won't find anywhere else. So make sure you visit daveskillerbread.com to learn more and do what my family and I do. Look for Dave's Killer Bread in the bread aisle of your local grocery store. That's Dave's Killer Bread amplified.
Ooh, baby, it's another jam-packed episode and a special guest on the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And we are picking our expert's brain on all of the top angles affecting your fantasy squad right now and in the future. Thank you so much for joining us for the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And here we are, another juicy Wednesday episode of your source for fantasy news. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and we are your everyday. Shout out to the everydayers making us your first listen. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Our special guest today is returning guest, longtime friend of the show, fantasy guru Michael Amato, Sportsnet, the hockey news, and managing editor at goaliepost.com. Michael, you're everywhere right now. You're killing it. We are always very grateful that you are back on lending some of your time. How are you doing? And thanks for joining us once again.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm busy, but I enjoy it, so it's good.
Thank you so much, man. Seriously. And you know what? Picking your brain, I'll be honest, and I don't want to tip my hand too much, has helped my own fantasy team. Reading your column. Check all of Michael's work out, sportsnet.ca, and of course, all over Twitter X for all of the fantasy takes you need. You really have helped my squad. And that's why I got to know, because one of the areas that I am most interested in, not only because it's one of the areas you focused on for a long time in the blue paint, it is something near and dear to my heart. So when I talk about goalies with you, you've had your eye on a number of good ones that have popped up, Kochetkov, Tarasov. Is there any names on your radar over the next year or two in that same vein of goalies that you have an eye on to make a fantasy impact? Maybe not right away, as some of these guys clearly take time to develop, but that are on your radar over the next year or two.
Yeah, there's definitely a few, probably some, pretty highly touted prospects that people might know, like Jesper Wallstedt in Minnesota. Obviously, I don't think Fleury will be back there. Not maybe an ideal banner year for Gustafsson, so maybe there's an opportunity sooner than later there for somebody like Wallstedt. There's Skarov in Nashville. There's been more and more rumblings. Would the Predators consider trading Saros? If that were to happen, obviously, like a Skarov would be a really good value there moving forward. Similar sort of situation in Calgary. I think Dustin Wolf is waiting in the wings, and you've got, Markstrom. I know there was a lot of talk about him to the Devils. That may or may not still be a thing, but that's another name to watch for if he moves. But I think one really not so much under the radar guy, but maybe forgotten about guy is Spencer Knight in Florida. So I'm sort of looking at next year. Bobrovsky's 36. They might want to reduce his workload a bit. Maybe Knight's up there full time. And then if you've watched any of the Panthers this year, they're a really strong team. And I think they've got a lot of their core locked up. And if they sign Reinhart, I think they'll be pretty good for a while. So Knight could be pretty good value next year if he gets a good timeshare there.
Yeah, I think Spencer Knight and Jesper Wallstedt would probably be the top two on my list as well. I've been very eager to see Spencer Knight back in the NHL, so we'll have to look forward to him next season. I'm going to pretty straight to the point with my question here, kind of going a different route. But I won't exclude goaltenders as well. But I want to know, who are your top 3 most underappreciated, undervalued fantasy hockey players? Basically, who doesn't get enough credit that they righteously deserve? And, I'll use Joel Eriksson Ek as an example. I think that guy goes very underappreciated for what he brings to the game, fantasy value-wise. 40 plus, 50 plus points, consistently in a season. He hits, penalty minutes, shots on net. So who are your top 3 guys who are the most underappreciated fans?
Everybody loves a sleeper.
Yeah, well, you definitely took my number 1 guy. Eriksson Ek for sure was going to be the guy I was going to say. Yeah, like you said, he does it all. If you're in a multi-cat league, he pretty much produces points from anywhere. He doesn't always play with the higher end guys there in Nashville. Sometimes he gets shot with Kaprizov, but he still puts up, like 60-point years. He does everything, hits, face-off wins too, if your league counts that. So he's always like a guy I try to target. A couple more, I would say, like somebody like Travis Konechny. I think
that's a good one.
He's been good this year.
I think he always gets drafted way too low. Like he's usually can score at like a 40-goal pace. Really good player. I know he missed a bit of time last year. Maybe that was part of it. Even someone like Clayton Keller, like Arizona is obviously not the first place you think of when you're looking at, taking players higher in your draft, but Keller is basically a point per game player, not a ton of talent around him. So I always think of him too. And there's even some goalies like, someone like Sam Montembeault in Montreal, just kind of a wild card there. Like, doesn't really get a lot of wins, but almost always has a quality start, which won't sort of sink your numbers, which is something I think is pretty important these days in fantasy because goalies are so volatile. Like some weeks, they're just, you look at someone like Cam Talbot, who's, was playing in the All-Star game and he's basically already lost his job. So like goalies can go up and down. We've seen Samsonov, Stuart Skinner this year was down. Now he's up again. So I think a goalie that on a bad team that's pretty consistent and can always give you, quality starts is really valuable too.
Really like those angles, especially with Konechny, because I think this Philly team has come a long way in a short period of time, and they're getting it done even without Carter Hart. And I know there's been a lot said about Samuel Ersson. He's definitely – I saw him on someone's Olympic list for Sweden goaltenders. No, seriously, and it's like that's obviously a long shot away, but this Philadelphia team has a lot going its way, and Travis Konechny is one of those players that fills out the categories nicely, and he's gotten it done at every single level he's played at, despite, even in Philly, most recently, not really having a ton to play with. Now look at them go. We're going to head to break very quickly, and we're going to come back with Michael Amato of the Hockey News, Sportsnet, and GoaliePost.com. Right after the break, more questions because March 8th, the trade deadline is approaching. We got some more questions from Michael. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You never want to be worried about buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all of your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals and all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets to all of your favorite events. Steele and I have used Game Time a lot to get NHL tickets to our favorite events, Leafs, Canucks out west, anything, maybe not the Wild anymore, Steele, but we'll talk about that later. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Hey everyone, Chris from Locked On Avalanche here. If you like using debit over credit, I just learned about something that's definitely a game changer. Discover Cashback Debit. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases, which means you can get cash back on NHL tickets or head-to-toe hockey gear to make this season a total win. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you go over to YouTube, check out Locked On Sports today. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. find the Locked On Sports Today channel on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's special episode with Michael Amato, Flip Livingstone, and your boy Steele Roden. Thank you again so much, Michael, for being here. We always love having you on the show. Flip, I'll turn it back over to you because you got a couple of fire questions, and then I've got one straightforward one again.
One more shout out to Michael. Make sure you're checking him out everywhere I mentioned: Hockey News, Sportsnet, and goaliepost.com, and on Twitter, of course. You've really been bringing it. And seriously, man, I really do enjoy reading your fantasy mailbag on Sportsnet. It's been helping me. So I got to dig more into some more selfish questions for myself. I mentioned goaltenders. This is obviously an NHL where every single trade deadline, we know teams are looking to upgrade in the cage. Some are more important because there are teams like the New Jersey Devils who I think if they got a player like Jacob Markstrom, who they rumored to be, they might be looking a whole lot different. So who do you see as a team or teams being most aggressive headed towards that March 8th? Because we know usually by 7th or 8th of March, if those are the deadlines, these deals get done in the weeks leading up. So I expect them to happen any day now.
Yeah, I think like you said, the Devils are probably near the top of the list. For me, it kind of, I think if they're trading for someone like Markstrom, it's probably going to cost quite a bit. So yeah, I'd imagine they're going to maybe see how the next week or two goes. And if they, lose 4 out of the next 5 games, maybe they're just not going to attempt it because it might be a little bit not worth it. But if
who knows, if Calgary wins 5 or 6, they're not even considering moving Markstrom.
Yeah, that's the other thing, right? They're still in the race. So I think it will take a lot to get them to waive. So the Devils, I think, are a team. I think the Kings I'd probably put on the list too. Like I know Riddick has kind of stabilized things there, but I don't know how many people really trust David Riddick, especially going into the actual NHL playoffs, not the fantasy hockey playoffs. But that would be a team I'd look at. And I think there are probably some like more under the radar teams that might be looking at maybe someone like Marc-Andre Fleury. So like I would say like the Avalanche. Georgiev's played a ton of games there. He probably needs a rest. I don't think they trust their backups too much. So I could see them maybe making a play for Fleury, or even Carolina. If Anderson's not, if they think Anderson can't come back, do you really want to play Tkachuk, 22, 23 out of the last 30 or something games here? Like,
and then the postseason,
he's pretty young too. So I could see those teams looking for kind of a veteran option. That's probably it. There's some other wildcard teams, like you look at a team like Toronto. I think they're probably okay as long as Woll comes back and kind of finds his game again. But if he's if he's struggling and Samsonov goes back down, like that's another issue there. Those are the teams I would think. I would tend to look at teams more like that are kind of like the Kings or the Devils that are kind of fighting to get in, where a goalie can make a huge difference there.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised that Joseph Woll's not back at this point. I thought his timeline was for end of January, even just like the beginning of February, but we're 2 weeks into February, and I think he just started practicing a few days ago or last week even. So very surprising, but I want to see him back in the blue and white Maple Leafs jersey because they definitely need some Joseph Woll in the blue paint right now. I'm going to keep it pretty straightforward again with this pretty fun question, I think. Obviously, Jack Hughes. I love having Jack Hughes debates on this show. It just seems to be a real popular topic. But
it is.
Who would you rather have on your fantasy team if you could draft and choose these two brothers? Would you rather have the Hughes brothers, Jack and Quinn Hughes, or the Tkachuk brothers, Matthew and Brady?
So I'm a big fan of offense. So I'll probably say the Hughes brothers. Not that the Tkachuk brothers can't produce offense as well. They're really talented. But yeah, I had full disclosure. I had a Jack Hughes debate myself with a bunch of people in my preseason rankings. I had him at number 4, and I had Brady Tkachuk at I think 11 or 12. And it was a multi-cat. I took a lot of heat for that, but I always look at in multi-cat leagues, I just look at them not so much as people always think of them as like banger leagues, but you only really get 1 point for winning the hits category. So if you're winning like the goals, the assists, the power play points, the shots, which someone like Jack Hughes, I think, can help you out. I think he has wider coverage than someone like Brady Tkachuk, even though I think Brady's like a unicorn of a player. Like there's not many players that play like him. So
Yeah,
that's kind of the way I look at it when I'm building my roster. But I think there's a lot of ways to build a team. And I don't think there's really a bad answer if you're looking at two sets of brothers there. But especially with Quinn this year, I think I would just go with the Hughes brother. I think if Jack Hughes didn't get hurt, we could have been having some like legitimate conversations right now about him in the Hart or him in the Art Ross this year. But he was on a crazy pace to start. But
look, we have had some heated Jack Hughes debates on this show. I think I'm going to tend to side on your side of the fence, Michael. We don't need to get down that path. But that's a caveat that's come into play for Jack Hughes, not to get down this path. And you can't predict a guy to get hurt, but it's been a reoccurring theme in his career. And if he has been able to stay in the lineup, and maybe let's imagine for a second, he plays even, 40 or 50 more games, meaning much more consistency. You could see this guy's numbers even higher than what he's been producing, but we're not going to get down that angle today because we don't want to waste your time. I got one more question for you, because one of the things Steele and I have been talking about is, and I've been a fumble victim of this myself, is you really can't afford as a fantasy GM, if you're within striking distance right now, like I'm not talking about you're out of it, you might have different angles. You can't afford to fumble the bag on even one or two players. So when I'm looking at must drops right now, I've been tentative to do episodes because I really don't want to come on here because I'm kind of unsure myself. So I need to ask you, the veteran, the expert, so I cannot take as much heat. Are there some players, maybe they're not must drops right now, so I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but players that you're looking at that might fade out, or players that you are looking at potentially dropping?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say these guys that I'm going to mention are must drops, but I think they're definitely guys to watch where they're trending. And the first guy I'm going to mention is Tom Wilson. He had a really good start to the year, but he's been stuck on 12 goals. It feels like forever, and I think he's got like 2 points in 16 games. So, if you're in a league that really values hits, maybe he's still a hold. But I mean, if he's not producing any offense, it's going to be really tough to hold him. And if you look at the Caps, like they might be selling off a few pieces. There's not a lot of offensive talent around them anymore. So he's going to be hard to hang on to if he doesn't pick it up a little bit. And then I think more of a general one would be rookies. This is the time of the year where they tend to hit a wall.
Good point.
If you look at somebody like Luke Hughes or Matthew Nyes, you can really tell lately that they've been struggling a bit. So again, if you're in a deeper league and you have some of those guys, they would be guys to watch. And I have one last one that might be a bit interesting to think about, considering he's playing so well right now, and that is Jacob Markstrom. So here's my theory behind that.
Hit me.
So the Flames have traded Zadorov. They've traded Lindholm. It sounds like they're definitely going to trade Tanev. There's a good chance they trade Hanifin. So heading into the fantasy playoffs, if Markstrom is missing his top three defenders, the Flames have pretty much sold. And they're missing, Lindholm, one of their best players. I don't know how much you can trust Markstrom in a fantasy matchup in that scenario, unless he gets traded to the Devils. That's a different story. But if he's still in Calgary and they've kind of sold half their defense core and they're playing guys, up from the minors, it's a little scary to me because I have Markstrom and he's been phenomenal. So again, I'm not saying go out and drop him today, but
no, for sure.
Maybe try to, if you see some of those guys getting moved, maybe try to insulate yourself, because if you find the Flames playing some tough opponents in your fantasy playoff matchup, it could be tougher for Markstrom.
They lose Tanev and Hanifin. This angle is going to pan out nicely for you and make you look like you even know more than what you already do talking about. You're crushing it. Make sure you check out Amato_Mike on Twitter. He's killing it every single day. Good source for your fantasy lineups. Check him out. Make sure you're checking us out every single day, Monday through Friday. We'll have Michael back on very, very soon. Much love, my friend. Good to see you. Good to talk to you once again, as always, and pick your brain. Really, really good answers, and I hope you're doing well.
Great. Thanks for having me, guys.
And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with Quick Bet. Of course, the fan favorite, same game parlays, the exclusive player props, and a lot more on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook of the NBA.
Have you ever seen an NHL player get off a team bus and think to yourself, gosh, I wish I could dress that nice? Well, with Indochino, you can. Indochino makes fully customized suits that don't require a trip to the tailor to get that perfect fit. Recently, I was shopping for a new dress shirt for my upcoming wedding, and when I decided to go with the Hyde herringbone shirt, I was blown away at all the customization options I had. I could change the type of collar, cuffs, and even decide whether or not I wanted a chest pocket, all while being incredibly affordable, especially given the quality of the product I was getting. New colors, fabrics, and outerwear styles are added regularly too, so it's easy to create your next look. Level up your game with Indochino. Go to Indochino.com and use code NHL to get 10% off any purchase of $399 or more. That's 10% off at INDOCHINO.com with code NHL.
And thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with your boy Flip Livingstone and Steele Road. And thank you so much for tuning in, making it your first listen every day. Continue to hit the subscribe, the follow button, and leave a 5-star review. Thank you so much again to Michael Amato for jumping on for today's episode, diving into all the fantasy questions we had for him. So make sure you go check him out on Sportsnet. And Flip, big time bets where the money is made. I'm 3 games on the schedule for Wednesday night. I'll throw it over to you where you're looking at first.
I got a same game parlay, so if you want, I can just spit this off.
Rattle it off, baby. Rattle it off.
Because, look, it's kind of ironic because I'm looking at this Florida Panthers game headed into Pittsburgh. And you know when I talk about Pittsburgh, Steele, the angle I'm usually taking if I'm taking a player prop. And I have a player prop in the same game parlay. And it's not Sidney Crosby, but isn't it ironic, Alanis Morissette style, that my second favorite player prop, perhaps, is Carter Verhaeghe on the other side of the puck. So why don't we start right there? Because in 10 career games, my boy, Toronto native, Good Niagara Ice Dog Products, 6 goals, 5 assists. And I did the math, Steele. To me, that's over a point per game. So we're hammering Carter Verhaeghe anytime point, along with the under in this one. The Florida Panthers are flexing their muscle right now. We heard it from Michael. They're one of the best teams in the NHL, not just the East, in the NHL. And for obvious reasons, you even pointed this out. Maybe the best point that people aren't talking about, they're getting it done without a lot of production from Ekblad and Montour. And that was one of the big things last year, at least from Montour, that got it done for this club. Yeah. So they're not even clicking at full percent yet. So anyway, the under. Let me get back to that because 4 of the last 5 games for the Panthers, under the number. Oh, Pittsburgh, 5 straight games, under the number. And how about this? 4 of the last 5 games for the Panthers against Pittsburgh, under the number. That's my second pick in the same game parlay. And I'm rounding it out with my lock of the night. And I just talked up the Panthers nicely. 6-2-2 in their last 10 against Pittsburgh. That's points in their last 8 games. Again, 8 of 10 against Pittsburgh. They're cooking right now, Steele. 8-0 on the road. Last I checked, this is a road game. Florida, money line. Verhaeghe, anytime point. And I'm hammering that under 6.5. I'm really, really liking the same game parlay. And I'm going to give her big time.
Well, you know I'm definitely agreeing with at least one of those pick, if not all of them. Panthers money line is also where I'm at against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Bang. Minus 126. They've just been playing unreal hockey, and it's really difficult to know where Pittsburgh's going to end at the end of the season. They've lost their last 2 games. They're 3-4-3 in their last 10, and the Panthers just continue to surge right now. So obviously going with the favorite here, Panthers money line minus 126.
I love it.
Second pick of the night. I'm going to the Winnipeg Jets San Jose Sharks game under 5.5 at minus 102. Okay. 8 of their last 10 contests have gone under 5.5. Whenever these two teams seem to play one another, it goes under the number a lot. Under 5.5 is the number. I'm taking that at minus 102. Lock of the night, though, wild money line against the Arizona Coyotes at minus 118.
Yeah,
and
I have to.
When these two teams play each other, it's usually a 50-50 split in their last 10 games. However, they're on different strides right now. The Arizona Coyotes have lost. They're 2-6-2 in their last 10, while the Minnesota Wild are on a 3-game win streak and 7-3-0 in their last 10. So I'm going with the hotter hand, the hotter team right now in the Minnesota Wild. I know they're one of my favorite teams. That's not the reason I'm going with them. I promise you out there. But Minnesota
Steele.
7-3-0 in their last 10,
Steele,
and on a
stay
3-game
unbiased
win.
on this show, Steele. Do
We
you not remember what we do here?
Just a little bit, bit.
on.
It doesn't hurt anybody out there,
Come
but
on.
especially when we're trying to win some big time bucks.
Hey, look, I can't wait to go rip an open net, empty netter, end of the game, clapper into the net, because that's now all of a sudden cool to do. Fangulo. Anyway, not on today's episode, Steele. We're keeping it classy.
Keeping it classy indeed. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. You can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. They're here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. So make sure you go over there, check it out on Amazon Fire TV, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And thank you again so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day out there. Good luck with all your bets, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
Be warned that once you pick up a refreshingly cold drink from McDonald's and people see just how refreshingly cold that drink from McDonald's is, you may create drink envy. Because there are drinks, then there are drinks from McDonald's.
For a morning brew that really creates a stir, get any size iced coffee, including caramel and French vanilla, for just 99 cents before 11 a.m. Price and participation may vary, cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today.